Beta 480RR is a sexy, lightweight powerhouse that excels both on and off-road, but comes at a pretty hefty price. Is it worth it? A few weeks ago, I was very fortunate to ride with RJ and his two sons out here in the Badlands. When RJ unloaded his trailer, I was instantly drooling over his gorgeous Beta 480RR. It's quite a rare bike, especially for folks on my side of the financial tracks. When I think of betas, I think of my good friend Barry Morris from the cross-training enduro skills and Adventure Oz channels, who very humbly claims he's a Gumby, but we all know he's absolutely legendary. Barry loves betas, aka the Italian princesses, and ever since I saw him shredding around Australia on one, I've wanted to try one for myself. Well, before that day when RJ pulled up, I had never seen one. So when he insisted that I ride it for a week to make a first impressions video for this channel, I had a hard time scraping my jaw off of the cement. When I first saddled up on the Beta, I planned on taking it to one of the harder trails in my area. Well, I made it as far as the gas station before turning back to my own garage and swapping it out for my old trusty DRZ. I was that intimidated by it. It felt very smooth, very powerful, very tight, and very expensive. Vastly different from my very worn-in DRZ. Think of it like putting on an old helmet versus a brand new top-of-the-line helmet. One is kind of loose and comfortable and sweaty and smelly, but familiar, while a new helmet is tight and exact and lightweight, but hasn't quite conformed to your head yet. I knew the Beta was a motorcycle that I would need to ease into and not just take it out and shred it on my very first ride. So when I finally got the guts to take this $10,000 Italian princess out, I decided that it would be on typical dual sport trails and in typical conditions. Nothing absolutely nasty, but I'd push it a little bit and see how it handled on the highway, paved roads, fire roads, moderate dirt, whoops, washes, and then finally, some fairly nasty stuff. So as the title states, first impressions. Well, power is immediate, right off the first millimeter of twisting the throttle, but it's not rocket ship delivery. Somehow Beta has perfected this. Many bikes with this much power feel like you could easily loop them off of a whoop with an accidental whiskey throttle. The 480 felt planted even when ripping the throttle wide open. It was easy to get the back tire to step out or the front tire up, but for an average rider like myself, those step outs were largely intentional. On rocket ship bikes like my old 450X girlfriend, just a slight miscalculation of the throttle would send the rear tire very wide. It looks really cool and it's immensely satisfying to launch an enormous rooster tail, but breaking traction, especially unintentionally, isn't all that reassuring or even fast for that matter. So Beta did a great job. The gearing on the Beta feels quite high for a dual sport, and that glorious 6th gear makes the revs at normal roadway speeds feel totally tolerable. The surprising part is the smoothness. It lacks that familiar chug common to most thumpers, even at very low, near-stall RPMs. That said, it just wouldn't stall on me. The DRZ or KLR or even WR have a very tactile warning system that a stall is imminent. It's like this audible chug and a feeling like the piston is going to come through the seat. On the Beta, it just goes. There's none of that thumping feeling. Weirdly, it feels like a twin. It has that great dual sport tractor factor, but doesn't ever feel like a tractor. As a dual sport, it has to be functional both on and off road to a reasonable degree. Of course, this isn't going to be a Goldwing, and no dual sport ever will be probably, but it should be able to cruise at highway speeds without feeling like it's going to explode or like you're gonna rattle apart. On the road, it would maintain 70 miles per hour in 6th gear at 6,000 RPMs, and it felt like it had a lot more to give. The ride was actually quite good for a dual sport with less than typical vibrations and more of the discomfort coming from the shape of the seat and the tune of the suspension than anything else. On the road, it was probably the best dual sport I've ridden, but not by very much, and it doesn't hold a candle to the comfort or power of a dedicated road bike. As a roadworthy bike though, it does have very good controls and road-friendly options. Signal indicators, controls that are functional and familiar, a neutral light, which is always handy, and even a gas light, which is rare. Gas mileage seemed to be worse than most dual sports, because for every gallon the other bikes I was with spent, I was filling up about 1.5 gallons. However, there are so many variables to gas mileage on a dual sport that you have to take that with a grain of salt. Just for fun, my friend Kurt and I did a rolling drag race starting at 20 miles per hour and stopping at about 75. The Beta 480 versus a modified 2008 WR250R, bored and stroked to 310 cubic centimeters. Now obviously that's a tall order for the WR250 to keep up, even when modified, but in the end, even on a wide-angle lens...
Alright, 3, 2, 1, go!
Pretty close. You can see that the tall gearing and higher redline on the Beta was a large factor, as gear shifts were much farther apart than on the WR. So for two average riders on a rolling drag race, the distance you see here is what 9 years newer, 59 pounds lighter, and 170 extra cubic centimeters gets you. Off-road in the nasty stuff, it is mysteriously smooth and seems to have multiple personalities. On one hand, on a fire road, it translates every single bump and washboard and judder directly through the bike and straight into your spine. It feels very tall when you get up over the tank, and at speeds above 50 miles per hour on rutted out desert stuff, it felt pretty unstable to me. But then there's everything else. It feels hard and very tight and very digital off-road. Everything is going to happen just the way your body tells it to do. Suspension in the nastier stuff is buttery smooth, and in mellow whoops it performs just fine, even in a big G-out section. The brakes have excellent feedback with a nice linear pull that eases on very lightly to full lockup over a nice manageable span. However, I couldn't fully appreciate the brakes because I had the wrong tires on it, and I'll get to that later. The weight of this bike is amazing, and it's probably this bike's biggest seller. It's 235 pounds dry, which is very low for the displacement and very low for any dual sport. Unlike lighter bikes though, it doesn't buck and bounce, but unlike heavier bikes, it feels very nimble, and yet somehow feels just as planted on the roads as a much heavier DRZ. So what does it feel like? I can say that if you've ridden a Honda XR650R, the Beta is good in all of the same ways, but how it feels is completely opposite. The 650R felt like a medieval trebuchet. Everything is very analog and manual. Even twisting the throttle feels like operating some kind of old torture device. In contrast, the 480 feels like a digital bike in a digital age. Everything is very smooth and effortless, very modern, and it almost made some of the terrain feel too easy, like a cheat code. So let's get down to what many people are probably asking. Is the Beta worth the price? It's almost $10,000, which is actually on par with other high-end dual sports. Is it better than a similar bike from KTM or Husqvarna? I have no idea. I do know that it doesn't have some of those weird design decisions from the newer tech bikes, like gas tanks toward the rear of the bike and fuel caps that unfortunately let dirt in. Everything is pretty normal on this bike, in the places that you'd expect them to be, which is good. Is it better than a DRZ 400? Well, definitely. But a brand new DRZ costs $6,500, nearly $3,500 less than the Beta. So is it $3,500 better? Well, yes and no. That's up to you and your budget to decide, and I hate that answer, but that's what you get. It is smoother on the road, but still buzzy. Better than most dual sports, but not by a huge margin. Is it better in the dirt? Well, it's a lot lighter, and the power delivery is fantastic. But high-speed stability was another story in my case, and, well, it depends on how you define better. Is it faster? Well, that's another very weird, very lopsided story. Now for a few grains of salt. Obviously this bike wasn't set up for me, it was set up for a guy about 20 pounds away from me, which makes a difference. The tires were more 75-25 style Kenda big blocks, which while they score really good reviews on larger motorcycles, for dual sports and dirt bikes, I think they're terrible. Even a Kenda K270, which is considered a 50-50 tire, makes a huge difference in the dirt compared to the big block. Braking often slid the rear tire forward in the dirt, and the sidewall on the off-camber hard bits felt non-existent. Turning on hardpack was sketchy on the rear wheel, and turning on the soft stuff was almost guaranteed washout on the front. But this is a motorcycle review and not a tire review, and I'm sorry that I can't give a very relevant review of the bike because that one minimally important bit of a motorcycle, you know, the part that connects all the metal and suspension and tech to the ground, was lacking. Now, before I deliver this little shock, just a quick note about bias. There's no doubt that I have it. I love my DRZ 400E, and I do love proving that this old 2000 first-gen DRZ that cost $1,700 5 years ago can still hold its own against these new, expensive, capable, and very sexy machines. But I also want to see exactly how fast I can go on the other bikes while still feeling in control. I'm not botching results just to make the DRZ look better. That would be totally ridiculous. The fact is, my DRZ was near the bottom of my Ghost Race results until I recently raced it again to see where it would stack up against the Honda 450X, and I was utterly shocked that I could ride it faster than the 450X. So with the results versus the beta, chalk it up to bias, chalk it up to an off day riding the beta, chalk it up to the tires, the suspension setup, chalk it up to being worried about crashing my friend's $10,000 motorcycle, or chalk it up to only 5 days worth of experience on the beta compared to over 5 years experience on my DRZ. But despite the legendary smoothness and superior power and the much lighter weight of the beta, in my Ghost Race times, on the same course, in the same conditions, I was nearly a full minute faster on my DRZ. Now believe me, I wanted the beta to be faster. I expected it to be faster, and as I was riding, I knew it would be faster. It felt so much faster, aside from a mistake or two in braking too late that cost me maybe 5 seconds total. So in the end, I do really believe that the beta is the better motorcycle. In the words of Ferris Bueller, it is so choice. If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up. But if you don't have the means and you have to settle with a used Japanese motorcycle, those will do just fine too, trust me. And thinking back to the rolling drag race with Kurt, I think that's a pretty good summary of the motorcycle. The beta is better, but not by some enormous, insurmountable margin. In economics, it's the law of diminishing returns. There comes a point where squeezing out just a few more horses or shaving just a few seconds off a lap time or dropping just a few pounds from your bike starts to cost a lot more money. Money that is truly well spent on the 480, but unless you really need the best, that money may be better spent elsewhere. And in the world of racing dirt bikes, I understand the power to weight ratio and the speed and lap times. But in the world of dual sports, all that stuff is pretty irrelevant to me. The only races that I've ever participated in are a couple of drag races and these silly ghost races with myself, and those are woefully unscientific bodge jobs at best. Range, maintenance schedules, and reliability are top priorities in my dual sport book, and according to longer-term beta reviews, the 480 has those things, just like the DRZ and the WR250R. I do have to say though, however Beta managed to keep the planted feeling of a heavier dual sport on a bike that weighs 235 pounds dry is amazing. How they crammed so much power into such a light bike, then keep that bike from looping off every other whoop is also just mind-boggling. So in the end, is it worth it? If you want a bike that is light, and powerful, and rare, and sexy, and have the means, and have no interest in riding fire roads, then yes, the Beta is worth every penny. It is an absolutely fantastic dual sport, but if you can settle for a little less power, a lot more weight, and virtually no sex appeal, then a less expensive Japanese bike may be a better choice for you. And just remember that even though none of your friends are going to drool over it, picking up a less expensive bike doesn't automatically mean that you'll be hanging at the back of the pack. Remember, just like Bari says, it's the rider, not the bike. Thanks so much for watching, and an enormous thanks to RJ for letting me ride his beautiful, beautiful motorcycle for a whole week. If you enjoy dual sport motorcycle videos like this, please subscribe for more and check out my other bike reviews if you're in the mood for more like this. Much love, eveRide out.